Gavin, James and Colin. We're here today now with a very special episode. A friend of our programme, a new friend anyway, Tate Donnelly. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on, Colin. Much appreciated.
So Tate ran at the general election earlier this year. He was the youngest candidate to run for Dáil Éireann on that occasion. He ended up just falling short, but he got well over 4,000 votes, which is pretty damn fantastic for a first-time candidate and somebody who's the same age range as ourselves. And just to say as well, he ran in a constituency which had the likes of Matt Carthy and Heather Humphreys in it. So to imagine the scale of that challenge is something, Tate. How do you feel looking back on the campaign itself when you were running?
Thanks a million. That's a nice introduction. The way people are introducing me these days is usually a little less friendly than that. It's a bit crazy. To be honest with you, I'm quite. The way it happened was good in the end. I didn't have time to think about it. It was a very, very short campaign. It was only really 3.5 weeks, and I suppose I only decided to run. Well, we had a candidate who pulled out at the beginning of January. We had to select a new candidate. I first thought it was a possibility on a Friday evening, and I mentioned it to my mother on the Saturday. And by the Friday evening I mentioned to my mother. We chatted about it with family and stuff on the Saturday. By the Sunday I was selected, and by the Monday it was public.
Wow,
which was
quick turnaround.
A bit crazy. Yeah, so literally it was like having a discussion of should I run for election or not. Yeah, you probably should, whatever. And then it was like laptop out, we're designing a leaflet. Like it was so quick. There was no time to even think about it. And literally my life changed overnight. I put out a video on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and that kind of thing, and whatever, add them up, probably over 100,000 views, and like just ridiculous, like crazy coverage. And all of a sudden it was like phone ringing, like it's, news talk, it's radio and Gael talk, it's whatever, wanting to speak to you. And it was like, wow, this has changed just like that, just and even the Guardian came and met me and did a piece, and Luke Ming Flanagan came and canvassed for me. And I was on Pat Kenny's show, I was on RTE debating with Owen O'Brien and Malcolm Byrne, who was a Fianna Fáil TD senator now, and Adrian Wallace from PVP, and it was my local radio station. It was like I was on, like I'd only ever been on once for the local radio, like for one thing, and all of a sudden it was like cracking things out 3 times a week, so in that sense I just had to get into a bit of a rhythm. And there's a 1,000, like there was balls.e and there was the Star and there was whatever, like there was just so much that I just had to get into a rhythm. And calling at doors as well, didn't have time to think about it. The leaflet was printed within a couple of days, the poster was printed within a couple of days, like the photo was taken on that Monday. I just didn't have, that's just the way it was, it just so happened so quickly that before even thinking about it, a photo was taken the next evening. My face was up on poles. My friends were out with me with the ladder in the car. So there was no chance to even think about what am I doing here. What are people going to think of me? Like it happened so quickly that, and I got so many messages at once just saying, "What the hell?" It was just all this one. But in a way, I think about it now. Like now, I'm more inclined to get nervous when I'm going on the radio, for example, or whatever, because it might happen once a week now, or it might happen whatever. And like in a way I'm glad how crazy it was. In a way I'm glad I wasn't selected or whatever 6 months beforehand, or I wasn't thinking about it. I literally didn't think it was a possibility. We had another candidate, I wasn't on my radar, so in a way I'm glad that all of that just had to happen. I just had to adjust. I didn't have time to think, sleep much, eat much, whatever. It just happened. It was 3 crazy weeks. I looked a lot older by the end of the 3 weeks than I did at the start. I met someone in the second week, early in the second week, and for the first time, it was 2 weeks later, so just before the end, I met them again, and they were like, "Wow, you eyes, your face!" Like I was like, so it was over, and then I could just try and come back to some sort of whatever normality. Which hasn't really happened now because the whole government formation thing and lockdown as well and everything, so there hasn't really been normality. But no, in a short answer, I did enjoy it. and I am glad that it was short, because it allowed me kind of a sense of it's just a long answer. Sorry.
Now, just to get a sense of it, then, when you were running, I mean, for somebody who's so young like yourself, to get into this situation where you're running for the Dáil, how long had you been a member of the Green Party for prior to this?
I went to a Green Party event in 2016 to see what I thought. I didn't join. I got involved. I kind of contacted my local group and that kind of thing in 2017. And I think I joined January 2018, because the membership goes January to December, whatever. So I might have joined in 2017. I think I joined early 2018. I'm not sure. So is that 2 to 3 years, more or less.
And then to get a sense of it, then the platform that you ran on in the election back in February, can you give people a sense of what that document encapsulated? What kind of policies were you guys running on?
Yeah, this is like a throwback now. Hold on to like what was it? I used to know exactly every line of my leaflet off by heart and all that. No, look, it's I'm a passionate activist, really. I'm not an expert. I didn't claim to be an expert. I didn't claim to have all the answers either. And I said to people on the road, I'm not going to promise you this or that, but I promise you I care, and I promise you I'll fight for you. I study economics. I'm left of centre. I believe in equality. I believe in redistribution. I believe in all of that. I'm a climate activist, obviously. Went to the Green Party. I thought we needed real climate action. I wanted to fight for rural Ireland. I thought there was huge potential. I think there's been an issue with the climate movement as well. Is it seen as anti-rural? I thought there was huge potential, a huge number of rural jobs actually to be created. When you look at the retrofitting and energy and all these kind of agriculture as well, there's a lot of actually jobs being created. But I ran for mental health as well. And Monaghan and Cavan have the 2 highest suicide rates in the country. And I suppose I wanted to stand up for young people as well. And it's on a whole, it's housing, mental health, climate. They're all issues affecting young people at the minute.
Absolutely.
And I think the youth vote is never really seen as important. To give you an example, the pension age thing was the big, the big issue. Like, if it was something on, welfare of people of 18 years old or whatever, that kind of thing, it wouldn't have been nearly as big an issue. And I think as soon as the pension age thing became an issue, all of a sudden, all the parties were like all over it, like, we're not going to change the pension age. So this kind of thing, whereas it didn't. I think the likes of climate action, the likes of even the rental market and housing, education, even I felt young people needed a voice on it, and mental health and kind of the perspective of a young person as well. And it's important if you're elected to Parliament, if you're elected to the Dáil, it's important your stuff, absolutely. But it's important that doesn't override a sense of passion and new ideas, and that certainly was lacking from the Dáil, I thought.
Now, you're touching on something that is quite interesting for people looking at the Green Party at the moment as members vote on the programme for government, which is that to somebody who is neutral or somebody who's from the outside or not a member of a political party, it seems like there's a bit of a split in the party in terms of that you have a younger group of people like ourselves who are climate activists, maybe members of Extinction Rebellion, groups like this, who are really campaigning on the issues and they campaign with heart, versus perhaps an older contingent of a political party who are more your traditional politician. Not saying that in a negative way, but just more polished, they know the platform, they know the policies, they put them out there, and they're always willing to compromise. So, for somebody like yourself, who's a young person who believed in the manifesto that was put forward, what kind of, let me just start by asking you, what's your stance on the programme?
Yeah, well, I'm against the programme for government. I've publicly come against the programme for government. I think the media have failed a little bit, and I'm not trying to attack the media here. I'm just saying I think that maybe they failed to fully grasp the concerns of people voting against the programme for government. It's not just young people. I've spoken to so many older members and that kind of thing, and former candidates and that kind of thing who are voting against it. But it is a truth that the majority of young people in the party will be against it. I see it more, to be honest with you, as a no vote is the realistic and the pragmatic option. about what we will get done in a coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. What in that programme for government can we deliver? What in that programme for government will be delivered that we don't want delivered? Like what bad stuff are we going to be complicit in delivering? And so I see it more as a realistic and a pragmatic thing to know that this programme for government isn't going to be great for the country. Now there's a lot of good stuff in it that if it does happen, fantastic. It's vague language and like that, you're always going to get vague language in a programme for government. Those things generally aren't usually implemented, but I get the fact that if we're in there we've a better chance of implementing them. I do understand that, but I think then you're delving into like an ideological stance of, if we're in there we have to be in there, we need seats at the table, we need to roll our sleeves up, we need to get to work. That's actually appealing to emotions and appealing to a sense of, it's appealing as well to the kind of the sense of urgency of climate action, that we don't have time to wait, not thinking, is this the right thing for the climate movement? Then it has to be now. It has to be now, rather than, well, it might have to be now. And that is a scientific fact. Like, don't get me wrong, that it does have to be now. But could we be doing this the wrong way? And the reality is that the entire population doesn't understand it has to be now. It's an unfortunate truth. That the entire population doesn't understand has been. Will they in a future date? I hope so. I think more so, at least. But that we have to understand, I think, that this could be damaging to the environmental movement. I think there's aspects of this that, if implemented or if going the way that it could go, and possibly I would say likely to go, could put people in poverty. I think as well, this isn't going to fix the housing crisis. It's quite poor on housing, the programme for government. Now, having said that, if everything that's promised is implemented, and everything, like it talks about cost rental, for example, which is a green policy, but cost rental, it doesn't give a figure. It just says, we'll more or less think about implementing it or whatever, which is great. Like, I don't think that means there'll be cost rental. Like, let's be very clear. So I would see that as a pragmatic approach, because generally centre-left parties and the smaller parties don't get what they want in these circumstances, and it does evaporate their voter base. It puts people off them, and we don't have time for that with climate. This is what appeals to the urgency for me, is we don't have time to make a mistake like that. We did that mistake in 2007 to 2011. Some good stuff came out of it, a lot of bad stuff did, and the Greens got a blame. Like, I mean, you can't vote on this programme for government based on the climate and the transport section, which are great, because if and when possibly there's austerity, or if the housing crisis, and when again possibly the housing crisis gets worse, you're to blame for that as much as anything. You cannot vote for this based on what wins you got. You have to vote for this on a document as a whole. And so I think it's a realistic and it's a pragmatic thing to know that the smaller party or the centre-left party in a coalition like this, every single time in the history of the state they've gone in with Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, a party like this, they've lost out electorally every single time. Not been wiped out, but they've never once gained electorally. So every party has lost votes for doing this. So if we're going to do that, fine. I don't mind. It's about getting your policies across the line in politics. It's about implementing things. So it's not about public support, and it shouldn't be about wavering it's about getting what you believe in across the line, and why you're in politics and affecting change. But we have to do that knowing the risks that this is taking. And the wins in this, for me, are not worth the risk. At least the guaranteed wins. All the possible wins in the world, all the possible things we could achieve, great, fantastic. In 5 years' time, there'll be no carbon emissions in Ireland, and we'll all live in mansions, and everyone will have a bus outside their house, and great. But from what I see as realistic implementation of this over the next 5 years, and it's not, I'm not saying our negotiating team did a bad job. I think they did a great job on climate and transport in particular, actually, and probably softened a lot of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael policy in other areas. But for me, it's not a question of, are you too idealistic to compromise? For me, it's a question of, are you too idealistic about going in and changing everything, and everything will be fixed? Because everything won't be fixed. It's going to be a rocky, difficult 5 years in there. A real difficult. There'll be a real lot of public resistance as well to the things that they don't like. I mean, if that carbon tax is as regressive as it could be, it could put people in poverty, and they should stand up and be annoyed about that. Absolutely, I can't stand up for that. Like, they should stand up and be annoyed about that. And there will be, and we saw what Gilets Jaunes did in France as well. Like that, this can cause serious damage if done wrong. Like it can set the climate movement back so many years. For me, it's a balance. You have to find a balanced view on, is this the right thing or the wrong thing. I look at the track records. I look at what's definite in the programme for government. I look at the history of what happens when parties like this go into coalitions like this. And I think it's the wrong thing to do. I don't think it's even the best of the other alternatives either. So I don't think this is the right thing to do.
Now, when we look at the document itself, the programme for government, it doesn't include everything that you wanted in your manifesto. That's obviously going to happen through negotiation. But it does include some of the core policies. So, for example, that 7% cut in carbon emissions per annum, which was a big part of your campaign. Or, for example, now a little bit different, but still on point, somewhat, some would say, that you had an immediate ban on use of smoky coals in the Green Party manifesto. Now, this programme for government says that it will be implemented over the time of the government, the lifetime of the government. So it's not an immediate ban, but it's the document says over the lifetime. Yeah. So now when we look at those two things, for example, and this use of the term Green New Deal in the document, and we compare that to when you say that this is something that's so urgent that we need to take action now. So the question then is your issue with the document not containing all of the promises and not being progressive enough on climate change, like Extinction Rebellion say, or is it that knowing who your partners would be in government, that you don't believe that any of it would be enacted?
Maybe a bit of both. Maybe I'm extra cynical of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, which from my point of view is a healthy way to be.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe a bit of both. I don't see it as. I don't see it. For me, it's not about. For me, maybe it's tough to put this across. For me, I don't see it as this is good but not good enough. That's not the way I see it. Like, and there's a saying, don't let good be the perfect of, or good be the enemy of perfect. That's so if it's good and it's not perfect, fine by me. Great, I'll support it. I clearly don't see it like that. So it's not. I don't see it as like halfway there. Or for me, there's damaging things in there. Like climate action. Like there's a way of doing, like you can do climate, like a lockdown is climate action technically because people can't leave their house. But do we think it's good? No, absolutely not. It's a way of reducing emissions, but it's not good. There's stuff in there that I don't think's good. That's what it comes down to. It's not a are you compromising? And it's I don't think a lot of this is good. Like that's a real, like, and I can't say that enough. I don't think this is good, and it's not that our negotiating team did a bad job. They got loads in there, fair play to them. There's policies in there though that I think outweigh that, like really outweigh that. Like I think there's the deficit reduction strategy as early as budget 2021. To me, that means austerity. There's no commitment there. They want to reduce the deficit and come to a balanced book. There's no commitment. They won't reduce expenditure where necessary. To balance that book. They will not increase taxes. They've committed that. They will not increase taxes on the wealthy. They will not increase the corporation tax. They will not increase acquisitions tax, capital gains tax, income tax. They will not they will decrease the USC for self-employed people earning over 100,000. So that's clear. From an income side, they are not increasing taxes. They are like, and the only three they've said that they will are this is off memory now, but it's carbon tax, sugar tax, and plastics tax. Is that correct? So they're not revenue raisers; they're behavioural taxes. So the idea is you raise carbon tax, but that in 2 or 3 years' time, that your revenue is actually lower than it is now because people have changed their behaviour accordingly. And sugar is to say, you raise sugar tax now, you probably get some receipts this year, but by 2 years' time, Coke have a new Coke Zero product that everyone's buying instead. That kind of idea. And so the idea is they're not for revenue raising, but they're for changing behaviour. And same with any kind of they actually saying that their taxes increases are going to be focused on taxes with externalities, and those taxes are not revenue raisers. Now, what they are using them as is, and they're regressive taxes. So if you commit to a deficit reduction strategy where you will not increase any of the progressive taxes, you will only increase the regressive taxes, which all of those are, by the way. They all have disproportionate effects on the poorer you are, the more effect it will have on you. And you do not commit explicitly not to decrease in expenditure. but well, you say we won't. There's promises in there. We won't decrease this. We won't decrease that.
Mm-hmm.
And also then you say, oh, but we're going to spend loads of money on this new green thing. Add that up for me. So we have a deficit. We're going to have a strategy by the end of the program of government to balance that. So to balance the books. But we're not going to increase taxes, or progressive taxes at least, to achieve that. So we're, even already alarm bells should be ringing.
It sounds like you're very skeptical of the economic policies that are in this.
I am. I disagree with them, first of all, but then you have to read the rest of the document through that lens.
Mm-hmm.
How can you be spending, billions and millions on this and that, and how can you commit to that? We'll set up a commission on looking at that. Really, that's great. Set up a commission all you want, or whatever it is. That it won't happen because it can't. With that strategy, it can't. And when we have no say in finance, which we won't, it can't.
Now, actually, I'll ask you an economic question then to see what your perspective is on it. The manifesto that you ran on included a promise of universal basic income trial. That would be something that would be examined and explored, and it seemed like the party was pretty supportive of such trial. But in the program for government, it's really just captured in one paragraph, and it says that it would be put to the low pay commission for examination first, and then perhaps that there would be a trial at some stage during the lifetime of the government. So as somebody who is both a climate activist and an economic expert, what do you think of that kind of a proposal of UBI, and why don't you think it features very strongly in the program?
First of all, I'm not an economic expert, but I study it. It's what I'm interested in.
We'll talk you up, man.
I'd be genuine. I don't believe that we're going to see universal basic income in this program for government. Sorry, it's in the program. I don't believe we'll see it in the lifetime of the government. And you'll forgive me for not believing that, as you said after reading it. There's so many. Cost rentals, another thing, cost rentals, a big housing policy that we need to help fix the housing crisis. And it's same, it's in a paragraph mentioned there, about looking about having a thought about cost rental over the course of the next 5 years. It might enter my thoughts, there's a lot of it in there. And then, it nearly reads like they're finding ways to actually not do it, but to put it in a program for government, So as you've literally just pointed out there, there's a lot of that. And obviously, even if you're in favor of this, if you are, you don't, that a lot of those things aren't going to be implemented, and a lot of the argument is, well, there's no chance that if we don't go in, and I get that argument that if you want it, you do have to go in and roll up your sleeves, to use their phrase, or play senior hurling, or one of those awful phrases about politics. Make no sense, but anyway, I get that, but I think you have to look at the document through the lens of the economics of it. They do say they'll borrow. In fairness, they do say they borrow, but their intention is to reduce the current expenditure deficit, or the current budget deficit, and to balance books by the end of the program for government. And they'll borrow for capital spending, which is fine. You can actually spend quite a lot on transport and that kind of thing with that. So I do quite believe the transport part. I do believe a lot of the climate part, but I don't believe a lot of the rest of it. And it's not because our Greens didn't negotiate the very best deal they could. It's read the 2011 program for government with Labour. We're going to save the world. 2016 program for government, again the same. That's what program for governments are. They say all these things, and I can't remember exactly what it was now. I saw a tweet that something has been in the last 5 programs for government, a commitment to implement this. I can't remember exactly. I saw a tweet like a commitment to implement. It's in 5 programs for government now, and it hasn't happened.
Never implemented.
It's just. So, and I get it, and especially if it's not a main thing or a priority or whatever. But a universal basic income is going to be expensive. It might happen. I mean, geez, I might be wrong. We might vote this through. It might happen. Great, and I'm wrong then if that's the case. But there will be lots of other parts of it that won't happen.
True.
And it's very hard to predict, but you have to kind of make a balanced view. 3 or 4 in every 10 things will happen, kind of thing. For me, a lot of the things that I can guarantee out of those 10 are the bad things, because they're costed and they're timelined and they're whatever. Like, one of our only spending commitments in the whole thing is cycling and walking infrastructure, 1 million a day. which is massive, huge. And I believe that's going to happen because they've put it there. This commitment, 1 million per day, 360 million per year.
10% of the budget for that infrastructure would be for cycling, and 10% for walking.
And I do think there'll be a green transport minister. I believe that's going to happen. Like I do believe that's going to happen. Great, fantastic. Or at least every will in the world to make that happen. And like if that was the case on a lot of the other issues, like it's probably one of our only. And again, because they said they would borrow for capital expenditure, it makes sense. It can happen economically. It can happen. We'll have the power to implement that because I think we'll have the minister. And I really do believe that will happen. And that's fine. And I get that you have to compromise and give up on some other areas. And I get that any program for government for me to vote for it, for the Greens to go in, you're going to have to look at some section and really hate it probably, but still vote for it. You know, whether it's education or the Irish language or Shannon reform or whatever, there's always going to be stuff that makes you think that's awful. But for me, that there's a lot of commitments in this that aren't good. Like the carbon tax thing isn't good.
Looking at the transport situation which you mentioned, one of the things that I think a lot of younger voters would have liked in the Green Manifesto, and something that I myself gave the Green Party a very high preference for, was its policy on transport, because it included a guarantee that students would be able to have free access to public transport. And it also included a provision that if we were to have tourists or people who are maybe students on exchange or Erasmus or whatever the case may be, that they would also be able to avail of that, and that even commuters going to work would be able to avail of like a public transport annual pass for €365 for the year. None of that is in the programme for government. And additionally, as well, there was something about how they would try to improve the buses and trains by ensuring that you would be able to bring your bike on the train or the bus, that they would have storage units or racks for doing that. Now, as young people like ourselves, as students, I mean, you think about it, having transport which is so affordable or free, and having it in such a way that you could be able to bring your bike on board, they're superb policies that the Green Party put forward. But when it came to the crunch of the negotiations, they were suddenly out. So I'm kind of wondering, as a young Green, do you feel that the younger voice of the party hasn't really been carried through in the policy document?
Well, I have full faith that our negotiators went in to achieve that. Like, I have full faith that our negotiators did go in with the intention of delivering that. I mean, especially when you compare it to other sections, they got a good deal on transport. Like, transport spending is going to be transformed. Like, there's going to be 2-to-1 of the capital budget going on in favour of public transport over roads, whereas previously it had been 2-to-1 in favour of roads over public transport. Like, that's massive. It's going to mean more. I think it's going to probably be an emphasis on buses, but possibly rail as well, and that kind of light rail. So it will be transformative for transport. It's probably a little bit Dublin weighted, especially when you look then at the commitment on cycling and walking. I mean, possibly Cork, or even Waterford City and Galway City and those places. But there's the commitment to triple the rural bus link routes as well. Or to triple the number of journeys more so. I mean, there's a lot of places it goes once a week now. That changes to 3 times a week. It's not exactly great either, But again, I know that they probably went in with really ambitious policies there, and they got a lot. Like, that's the classic example of where you need to compromise to get good, and they did get good. And they didn't get the free public transport for students, but I think, in fairness, I don't know. I would like to think so, but I don't know if we ran a general election campaign now with the economic situation, if we could promise that. I mean, the things were good in February. It's hard to even think that, but there was no sign of a recession. So I would still campaign for it, absolutely. I understand, though, we're looking at cutbacks, not expansions on most things, I think. And therefore, I get why they didn't. I get why it's not there. I think the transport section is good. I would be lying if I said anything other than that. And I think the climate bill in the first 100 days and a commitment to, on average, of 7% for the next 10 years, some would argue it's not enough, but it's good. It's a massive step in the right direction. Again, it's don't let perfect be the enemy of good. It is good. And it is a massive concession to get Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael governments to admit to that, or to mean, it's ambitious. It's, again, will it happen? Probably not. But it's amazing. Like, it is ambition, and I get the idea. We need to get in there and roll up the sleeves to do that. But yeah, no, and there are two elements of the program for government that I think are really good to read and really amazing to read. The rest of it isn't great. So, and I've kind of outlined my reasons for that. The housing section is not great. The economics and budget section of it isn't great. The health section puts off launch care isn't great. Mental health isn't fantastic. But I'm kind of understating when I say it isn't great on a lot of those areas. It's the policies we campaigned against.
Why do you think that much of the mainstream party, the DDs, senators, even MEPs, are calling for members to vote yes to this document?
Good question. It'll be the most ambitious program for government on climate ever by a mile. That's good enough reason for a Green Party member to vote for it, and I respect that. It doesn't say bad things in the program for government. Let's keep that in mind. You have to read through it. Like, good and bad things happen in government. It doesn't say we're going to do austerity. It says it tries to avoid that, and you could read that as that's not going to happen. I don't. And our finance spokesperson has said she thinks it'll be the most fiscally conservative government in a generation, which is worrying. But then others are saying she's wrong, and they read it differently.
He's been calling for a no vote, right?
Yeah, exactly. So our housing spokesperson's also calling for a no, but then some people are saying, but the housing section isn't that bad. It's less ambitious than the Fine Gael manifesto on housing, but I suppose I saw an argument. It's less ambitious, but it's more truthful. Like, you never ever deliver on housing targets. They're just throwing a random number, some many thousand, whereas this, it seems to be, will actually deliver that amount. I don't think they will, but for me it's also an issue with the Land Development Agency and that kind of thing, whereas I don't think people have grasped that. But again, then it says cost rental, and some people say, oh, that's great, yeah, and if we're to have a chance of cost rental, we have to go in there. Whereas I see as, no, it's bad housing policy, and it says cost rental to make you think it's good, and that's, I get why someone would read that and don't think, well, if they do deliver that housing they're talking about, that's going to be great. And if they do deliver on cost rental, that's also great. So I do get that. And then there's a section on the referendums on housing. Now, I've heard from people who are in housing negotiations, that does not mean a referendum on the right to housing, which is what we campaign for. May possibly something like a referendum on to cap land prices, or what was it? Something like that. But it's not our policy. So, but I've heard some members of our parliamentary party reading as that could be a referendum on the right to housing. That's great. Imagine. Yeah, and I'm thinking, no, I don't think it is, and it's not going to happen. Especially the people in finance negotiations or in housing negotiations were loud and clear. They don't think it's happening. But again, it just shows you when you read a document, you can see good and you can see bad, and it's a lot of it's a weight. I don't think anybody is 100% one or the other. It's everyone's 60-40 or 70-30, and it's a moral dilemma. It's a strategic dilemma as well.
So coming on to that then, can you explain for viewers a little bit about, especially in these very strange times where people are being socially distant, or some people are still in a phase of cocooning and all of this, how exactly is the voting process taking place in the Green Party at the moment?
Yeah, well, I'm quite lucky. I'm lucky to be in a position of influence in the Green Party. I'm on the executive committee, and I was actually put on the special convention task force. So we were part of a committee to organise the special convention that took place on Thursday, which was the debate back and forth more or less on the motion. It was a presentation of the deal to members online. Now, this would usually be in a hall we booked out, or a hotel booked out in Dublin or something.
Right.
This was online. Fine. Everyone's kind of mobile. You could also call in via your phone. So if you didn't have internet, you could call in. But the deal was presented first by the negotiation team. There was then questions put to spokespeople or to relevant spokespeople. So you could ask a question on housing, question now in advance. You can, and it was good. There was a good question session, and then there was two sessions of 2 hours each, so 4 hours of debating on the motion, where there was 4 principal speakers on each side. So 4 got like a longer time, 5 or 10 minutes to speak for or against, and then there was a chance for ordinary members to speak for 2 minutes each, and about 75 ordinary members debated yes and no. Then the after that, then if you registered for the convention or if you registered for an absentee ballot, you are going to be sent a ballot in the post. So it's quite tight for time. For next Friday is the deadline, and then the option of a phone ballot is available. It obviously means it's no longer it compromises your confidentiality. But if you feel like whatever date you get the post is too late or whatever, so and then there's going to be a check-in system more or less of returning officers making sure everyone gets one vote, and that's it. So it'll be a postal ballot more or less for the vast majority of members. There'll be a few, especially overseas and possibly Northern Ireland members who the post is too late to or whatever, but they'll vote by phone. And next Friday then, so we have 2 returning officers appointed. Next Friday then they're going to count the ballots. And next Friday all 3 parties are going to have the results by Friday. So that's only a few days away now.
So Friday the 26th.
Friday the 26th, that's right. Yeah.
So how confident are you that this would be rejected by members?
I have no idea. I have no idea. At the special convention, the speakers were chosen, or the amount of speakers on each side were chosen by proportionality. So proportionality of speakers who requested to speak in favour or against, and that went 68% in favour, 32 against. So I suppose if that's a poll of people who requested to speak or people who felt strongly enough about it or knew you had their mind made up, 68% were in favour and 32 against. So it needs 66.6% to pass, 2/3 plus 1 more or less, and that's going to be extremely tight, obviously, just even by that sample. That's probably the only valid sample we have. From speaking to members, I've obviously spoken to hundreds of members against. I'm campaigning against. I'm voting against. I've tried to convince people I've spoken to vote against.
Absolutely, yeah.
So obviously I've come across lots voting against, probably more so in my circles, if that makes sense, just because. But I do think that we will get probably 30% of the vote against. And obviously after that, it's so hard to know. There's thousands of members. The average, there's a lot of members who've never engaged really. That's fine. You sign up to the party online, you register for your ballot. I've never met, even in my own area, a lot of members I haven't met. So how are they going to vote? I have no idea. Obviously I hope they read the programme for government. I hope they tuned into special convention, that kind of thing. It'd be very tight, if I'm honest. I think, I really, really do believe it's going to be really, really tight. Like that's my prediction. Like I want to be able to say I think we'll reject it. There was a lot of people predicting this will pass. Programme for government has never been voted down by members of a party ever. It's gone to members of, Greens, Labour. I don't quite know. Fianna Fáil, I think it's only brought in for this time round. But generally speaking, there has to be some voting process, even if it's just elected reps. And like Fine Gael have a weird delegate system, so it's not as democratic. But no party's ever actually gone and gone to this far and then voted against. So it's kind of unknown territory. And I don't know. I think that actual fact is what happens, because you're convinced that when a programme for government comes out with you in there and some commitments to your policies, you're better to vote for that and deliver for your voters. That's the way I think the average member genuinely believes that, and they listen to their TDs telling them to support this, trust me, I'll deliver. So it's very, very tight to call, really.
But you only need 33.5% to stop this thing.
Yeah, and as I said, I think we have 30. I really, really do think we have 30. I might be wrong. It might be 80-20. It might be 50-50. I think the best poll, though, is the 68-32 percentage of people who wanted to speak. So that's people who feel really strongly about it.
Yeah, it's still an indication.
Yeah, exactly. It's a poll. It's an indication. Obviously, I thought the no speakers were better, obviously, but I probably couldn't give a biased view on who was more convincing. I mean, you would have to be a total onlooker to be able to properly judge the standard of the speeches or whatever on each side, or the arguments. But it's a poll, and I would say it probably will be something like 68-32, could be 65-35, could be 66-34. Really, who knows?
And can you clarify for us? A story broke about 2 weeks ago on the Irish Times that Catherine Martin was considering contesting the leadership of the party. Now, she was leading the negotiations, but do you know where she stands on the programme for government? Is she supporting it or is she against it?
Yeah, well, she gave her support to it, yeah.
Okay.
And she spoke in favour, yeah.
So
she has given her support to it. But her husband, Francis Noel Duffy, has declared against it. He's a TD as well.
Family split.
Yeah, exactly. But it's healthy, like, and it just shows you, like, I'd say Catherine voted against going into the negotiations. So I'd say Catherine sees all the risks and all the dangers. She's probably weighted up and is slightly in favour. Francis, I think, is weighted up and is slightly against, and this is the problem, because there's good in there. There is good in there, and we know the risks of rejecting this as well. The risks of rejecting this are that we get a worse government. Like, that's,
what do you think would happen if this gets rejected? Do you think that we're going to be heading back to the polls in a few weeks' time, months' time?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think there's a few alternatives. I can't predict what. I mean, you give some. I'm not trying to give a prediction. You give some idea. Someone say, that'll never happen. But you can't say things never happen. First of all, because that's not a proper probability. Things, unless it's the moon landing on the earth or whatever. It's I think there's Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael independent is an option and a possibility. Sinn Féin, Fianna Fáil, Green is a possibility. I think if we rejected it, it comes down to what Fianna Fáil do. If Fianna Fáil reject it, if it goes to a vote of Fianna Fáil members, we'll find out Friday, first of all, how they vote on it. They might vote against it. There's a lot of people campaigning against it in their party, but
obviously campaigning against it on very different grounds to yourself, anyway.
Yeah. Well, we probably both don't like the carbon tax section of it, in fairness. But and the housing section, I think a lot of people aren't happy with the housing section. Like, the election was won and lost on housing, and we have to have way increased kind of we have to have way increased ambition on housing, not less, which is what this is. But anyway, what happens? It could be another election, absolutely. I don't know if Michael D will allow it. Fine Gael might push for that. I think Fine Gael would push for an election. I think Fianna Fáil would try to stop it happening. I think the Greens would speak to Sinn Féin and the Social Democrats.
Should you have spoken more to Sinn Féin?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to criticise. I think it was a dilemma. We could definitely have a shot at going into government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, or we could speak to Sinn Féin and possibly not have a shot at all, because it looks like I think they thought. And maybe they're more realistic than I am, and fine. I could be wrong here, but I think they thought Fianna Fáil leader Micheál Martin wasn't willing to speak to Sinn Féin. Now I think if we had spoken to Sinn Féin, what it did was it not that it's divided our party, but it puts the spotlight on a division or a disagreement in our party. Whereas if we spoke to Sinn Féin and we kind of said, and the Social Democrats as well, I'd say, and we got a block of 50 something, and I think Sinn Féin would have liked that as well, and Social Democrats as well, and then we said, right, Fianna Fáil, you have an option to come over here and deliver the change that the Irish people want. You have an option to, we'll find compromise. It'll probably be somewhere around the centre, but it'll be better government than yourselves and Fine Gael. People don't want Fine Gael anymore. I think coronavirus changed that. Varadkar's popularity shot up. You didn't want all of a sudden people, and I don't think it was sensible actually to take Varadkar out of his position at that time, or Simon Harris. They probably had to be the people at that time to lead us for another few months or whatever. Whereas now that's passed. Now I don't think people would mind bringing it out. I mean, now we're talking about changing Taoiseach. So I think we should have spoken to Sinn Féin. Yeah, I would prefer us to go into government with Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil. I think we could get similar commitments on climate. I don't think Sinn Féin are great on climate, but I think we could get similar commitments. We went and negotiated hard, but I think though the housing policy and the economic policy would be much better, much more aligned. I think you're not sacrificing social justice for environmental benefit. You get both, or much closer to both. And again, if there's an election, I said it, and maybe it's a bold thing to say. I know that people don't want an election. Well, some do, but well, actually, sorry, there was a poll there done of voters that if this programme for government is voted against, people do want an election then. But even so, I get people would probably prefer a government being formed in an election. I get that. But I think we could really stand proudly on the doorstep and say, look, we had an option here to go in and achieve climate action, but we felt it was at the expense of vulnerable people, and that's not the climate action we want. We want to protect people while saving the planet, and it's not going to be easy. We knew that we couldn't do that with this program for government. Can you give me a vote again? I do want to go into government, but I just couldn't vote for this program for government. It wasn't what we promised. It wasn't what I said to you on the doorstep. It might look like it. I might have said it in the media, but it's not. I would prefer to do that. I really would think that's a better route for the country. I think.
If an election were to occur, would you be on those doorsteps again, running?
I'm not a selected candidate, so I can't say definitely, but I think I would be interested in running. Yeah. It's not a personal thing. I don't know if I would have much of a better chance. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. The Greens might suffer. The country might blame them for not having a government. But again, as I said, I think we've clear and effective communication on why this wasn't right. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't want to be in government. It's not that we don't want to implement our policies, but we can do that after an election if the numbers work out better for us, or if there's a better program for government.
Now, Tate, it seems to me that you're very principled, that you have your stance and that you hold it very closely and you stick to your principles. So if this is to be rejected, if you get more than that magic number of 33.5% of members voting against it, do you think that perhaps the Green Party may need to consider having a new leader, somebody who was on the no side?
Well, I mean, we're having a leadership election anyway, a month from now, the 23rd or so of July. There's two candidates, Catherine Martin and Eamon Ryan. I publicly declared my support for Catherine Martin. I do think Catherine Martin's reluctantly in favour of this. She probably thinks it's better than the alternatives. She would have gone about this another way, if that makes sense. She didn't think we should be pursuing a government with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So that's not quite a no, but it's probably much closer to where I think it should go. They're the only two nominated candidates, so they will run. I've nominated Catherine Martin, so I'll be supporting her in that. And that's regardless of whether we go in or not. That vote's happening next month, and I'll be supporting her. It's absolutely nothing against Eamon Ryan. Absolutely not. Not a thing. I think she'd be better for a range of reasons, and it's a horrible kind of thing, this kind of personality contest, because you nearly have to criticize one to put the other forward. It's nothing against Eamon Ryan. I call him 9 out of 10, call her 10 out of 10. It's not that he's not good. I think she'll gain voters for us in rural Ireland. He has struggled to do that. He definitely has struggled to help develop the Greens in rural Ireland. We've nearly hit our max in urban Ireland now. We have loads of seats. 8 seats, is it, in Dublin? I'm not quite sure. 8. We have
something like that. 7, 8 seats.
8 out of 10 constituencies. We've won a seat now in Dublin. That's a lot. We have a seat now in Waterford. Not an urban constituency really, but a constituency with a city in it. We have a seat now.
That's our home city.
we have a seat. We have a seat now in Limerick City as well. We came quite close in Cork and in Galway. So apart from the 2 other Dublin constituencies and the 2 urban Cork constituencies and Galway, there's not much of a chance. But even all of those constituencies outside of they all have rural aspects to them as well, and we got good votes in the urban aspect, in the urban parts of them. But we have to start increasing our vote in rural Ireland. We came very close. Meath East, Sean McCabe came 4th on a 3-seater. We had Kildare, we had Vincent P. Martin coming 5th in a 4-seater. Well, sorry, we do have a seat in Carlow Kilkenny, but again, Kilkenny has a city.
Malcolm Noona.
Yeah, and Malcolm's based in Kilkenny City as well. He's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I'm not. We have a seat in Wicklow again. A huge vote in North Wicklow and urban. The Dublin commuter belt type thing. So we have to really look at where do we develop now. We have to become more palatable to people in rural Ireland. I have to be able to knock on the doors of Cavan-Monaghan and say, and I can at the minute. I do genuinely feel confidence that I can knock on the door and say what I'm campaigning for is good for rural Ireland. But we have to find voters there to continue to expand. And Catherine Martin's from Monaghan herself, so I think she's the woman to do that.
And just 2 last questions for you. So firstly, you have 5 days left. Even when we look at somebody like Greta Thunberg, who says that, this is on young people to make a difference and to be the voice for climate action. You have 5 days left to convince Green members to vote no to this thing. How do you plan to do
it? It's like, honestly, it's difficult because, as you said, Greta said, we have to act now, and here we are with a chance to act,
Yeah.
and that's how a lot of people see it. That's how a lot of people see it. I suppose I'm trying to get around what's in the programme for government. First of all, is it going to be action? Second of all action isn't good action. As I said, the lockdown is an example of bad action. Now, I'm not saying stuff and it's that bad, but anything that reduces carbon emissions isn't good. There's a way of doing this. There's a way of hitting that 50% by the end of the decade. It's so difficult. Like, realistically, is it going to happen? Maybe not. We can come close to it, but like, it's going to be so. We have to really give it our best shot. But there's a way of doing it, and to just think of that mammoth task, though. Like, that's huge. Like, that's massive. And you cannot do that without public approval. You cannot do that without people. Legislate for it all you want. You need people. You need public approval. You need like, and it's going to have to be enduring. It has to go for 10 years, and then it has to keep happening. Not only does it have to, people have to keep up their habits. It has to accelerate. We have to be net zero by 2050. So it's so difficult. Like, it really, really is. It's going to be a mammoth task. And we won't do that by putting people in poverty. I'll tell you that. We won't do, and that's what I see in this programme for government. So that, for me, it's like the hare and the tortoise. It's going to be a marathon, a fast marathon, but a marathon. And it's going to be there for my life, your life, our whole lives. We're going to watch it happen. Either we're going to watch the real effects of climate change happen, get worse and worse, or we're going to watch incredible, unbelievable action. But step one isn't to say, Colin, you're not going to be able to afford to be able to drive to work or to heat your home. That's not step one. Now, I'm not saying that's the intention of this programme for government. There is stuff in there on retrofitting and on putting the carbon tax back through welfare.
Still not at the numbers of retrofitting that the Greens had hoped for, though.
Exactly. Yeah. In all honesty, it's Fine Gael numbers. It's what they said in the climate action plan. Again, all retrofitting is good retrofitting, and I'm not, and there is the threat that you don't go in and there's no retrofitting, but and I get there's a lot on energy as well, really good. But the again, as I said, the first step is bring people on board, and I don't think this programme for government does it, and I think it really, really, really will affect not only the Greens' popularity, but the popularity of climate action, and we can't afford to let that happen. We need people to want climate action. We need people to be actively doing everything they can. And it's going to involve everyone. There's no such thing as me in 20, 30 years' time, but, living whatever life I want, it not affecting me. It's going to have to involve everyone.
But, let me just ask you, right? Because you and I get it, we get it. Do you actually think people get it? Do you think people see just how much of a threat this is to our way of life and our planet?
No, I don't. But I don't blame people for that either. Like, I mean, it's a privileged position to be in if it's your biggest worry. For me to sit at home reading a book on climate change, that's a privilege. For that to be something that worries me, that's a privilege. People are struggling. Like, there's a homelessness crisis. We're not going to get those people worried about climate change, and it's not. On average, you're more likely to be worried about climate change if you're in a higher socioeconomic position. It can't be. They all care. I'd say everyone cares. Everyone thinks. But I have other priorities. It's to pay my bills. It's to get to work and to feed my children. It's to bring. I mean, climate change is an issue for our for when you look at our children's future. It's something that we need to act on. But for a struggling mother, so is paying her bills. Climate change is an abstract concept, whereas paying your bills isn't, and putting food on their table isn't. And for them, that's things they can do for their children's future. Action on climate's a very difficult thing to do in your personal capacity. Very difficult thing to do.
I have to say, I respect you a lot. You stand for what you believe in. I have a lot of respect for you. So if this happens, if people vote yes to this thing from the three parties and we have a new government and the whole country is celebrating, and RTE and Virgin Media are out there saying how great this grand coalition is, blah, blah, blah. And 2 years' time, we have austerity. We have more of the same of what we saw from 2011 onwards. You're somebody who's a progressive. So how do you square that? Would you stay in the party if your party stayed in and allowed a kind of an austerity agenda?
Yeah, look, it's a difficult
principles, man. I respect you, so that's
yeah,
why I'm saying.
No, and it's a difficult position, and you can be as principled as you like and watch on from the sidelines, and it's not going to achieve anything, and I get that. If we have austerity, we have really the negative effects that I think we're going to have. There's no need for austerity. It's a political choice as well. We can.
Because based on what you're telling me, you see this program for government, or what's likely to happen, is going to be hitting hardest the working class and middle class of the country.
Yeah. I'll accept that I could be wrong. It's tough. It's a 140-page document, and it's tough. I could be wrong.
I believe you.
As I said on the housing section, cost rental could happen, for example. Do you get what I mean? Like, there's no commitment to it. It says the words, but there's no commitment to it. Now, that could still happen. Don't get me wrong. So if that happens, great. That will help tackle the housing crisis. And those numbers are unambitious, but if they all happen, it'll go a long way to help fix the housing crisis, or at least in the right direction. The carbon tax has a welfare refund. I don't think it's enough, but if somehow it is enough, and we aren't putting people in fuel poverty, which that's a crazy idealistic position, but if that happens, or at least if most of what happens in this government is good, in my view, I can stand by it.
But you're voting no to this thing because you know the realities of. Well, you have an idea of what the realities are of doing business with Bitcoin and Fine Gael. So I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's assume you are correct. Let's assume there's austerity.
If I'm correct, and if those things happen and we don't pull out, and if we don't pull out, because I think a lot of our TDs and our supporters don't want that. I think they're voting on us to go in and not allow that to happen. Actually, is one thing one reason they are supporting it, and I get that reason. Actually, is I had one of our TDs saying, I don't want that to happen. You vote for me, and I go in and I fight against it. Whereas if I'm not there, I can't fight against it, kind of thing. But if all of those things happen, obviously I would have to consider leaving a party that goes against everything I campaign on. If the only version of climate action is carbon taxes and cycle lanes and that kind of thing, again, I will have to. Walking infrastructure, it's all, well, not carbon tax, but the rest of it's all pretty good. The transport stuff's pretty good, but climate action has so much more to that. And if this government is more ambitious on cycling than it is on homelessness, I will have to seriously consider my support. But I thought about, I went through a phase where I was like, this Friday I'm going to leave if we go in. I hate it. But then I was like, I listened to a lot of debates. I listened to some of our TDs, and they're holding their nose here to support this as well, and they know that there's risks, but they're willing to take the risks of going in. I also think you don't generally pull down a government. You don't go in, but you don't generally pull down a government. It doesn't happen much. So I think it's a bit naive to think you can go in and pull something, and just pull out, and the country will be delighted you pulled out because you didn't get what you wanted. I think people say, well, you shouldn't have gone into that. But having said that, I would admire them if they're true to their word and they pull out. If the climate bill doesn't come in 100 days, or if it's not almost complete.
I was going to ask you about that. You have a climate bill that the Green Party said in the manifesto and in the programme for government that this thing will be enacted within the first 100 days. That's a very, actually, you said it very well, that this document, it's 120 pages of vagueness, basically.
Yeah.
But there's a very concrete proposal there. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the time we're going to get it done.
Yeah.
Do you have commitments on that if that's not done?
Okay. Whatever. I'll give it 120 days. I'm not going to.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. But if we don't see it quick,
or to the end of the year, whatever, fine. But it's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not the only thing. I like the austerity part is a big thing for me, to be honest with you. Austerity is a stupid way of going about this. It might not happen the first, but it said budget 2021. This budget will tell us a lot. I think by the time we get to budget time of this time of year, and we see what's in this budget, and also if there's been a climate bill or not, because that's going to be in about 100 days' time probably. That's October, so that's 3 months from now, more or less. Well, it's 3.5 months from now. Then we'll know if there's a climate bill coming in the next by then or within a few weeks after that, and what type of budget it is, we'll know what way this is going to go, or what way the wind's blowing. And at that stage, I'll be asking my TDs to pull out. I'll give them a chance if this goes through. We really will give them a chance. I'll try and give them a year even, but we have to look at concrete what happens. I could be wrong, and I'm not saying that. You asked the question, why would a Green TD support this? Well, they want to get in and stop this happening. Actually, they want to actually. But I actually think what's in a program for government is what's going to. Is the path they're going to go down, at least. So you can't change that path. But look, we'll see. It's such an unknown. There's so many variables. There's a million things, and like that stuff will happen every day, and there will be bad stuff. And I'm not going to say I'm going to leave at the first bad thing. That would be wrong of me. But it's a balancing act of, can you support this on balance for the good it does. That's why I feel I can't support the program for government, honestly. And again, I'll have to figure out that balancing act at some point over the next few months and year as well.
Well, look, my last question for you anyway. I really wish you well. I kind of in many ways hope that you do stay in the party, just to try and keep it somewhat left, or keep it somewhat centre at least, when it's starting to go right.
Well, I think the party is left. Don't get me wrong. The party is centre left at least.
I like to believe that.
No, the party is left or centre left, and I can tell you that as a candidate, and like our manifesto and everything. Like I'm left. I joined this party because I believe in it and its manifesto. I think there's the whole blue shirts on bikes. There might be members who are centre right, whatever, but generally speaking, the party is the policies we run on as well is left. Our voter base might not even necessarily be left, but we run on a left manifesto. Similar, I'd say, to Social Democrats. Left of Labour, I would say at this stage. Probably not as left as Sinn Féin, but we do run on a left. The party will be left. The reality is, though, we're being told that we have to compromise and go in a centre right. But it's going to be great on climate, but it's going to be centre right. And I suppose for me, I can't. It might be right wing, actually, to be honest with you. It could be, or it could be centre. I hope it's centre. If it's centre, I can hold on to that. I can say we actually pull Fianna Fáil get back a little bit. We actually
exactly.
It might be pretty bad, but it's not as bad as it would have been, kind of thing. But if that's not the case, no. Look, as you said, no. The party is left. Don't get me wrong. And regardless of what happens, the next election will run on a left manifesto. The balancing act is it too much compromise during a program for government, or is it? I mean, where we will be left. Don't get me wrong. But you're right. You need people in a party to pull it to the left, and I will continue to do that until I get old, probably, and then I'll be conservative myself.
That's what they say.
Yeah.
But look, my last question for you is simple. This is the part that you never know. This might be the part of the entire hour or an hour and a half or whatever it is interview that actually gets the most people to actually see it, the most eyes on screen, is to ask you this. I'll give you as long as you need. It's the last question. For those Green Party members who are getting their ballots from Monday, Tuesday onwards, who are just sitting on the fence, they actually haven't made up their mind yet, Tate, what would you tell them about this vote? What would be your message to them?
Oh no, that's it. No, I would first of all say to them, read the programme for government, read it thoroughly, read the language, read other programmes for government. That's what I did. Read the 2016 one, read the 2011 one, the 2007 one, read what's in there. Read what's different and what's the same. The budgetary policy section of this is the same as the fiscal policy section as 2011. They more or less copied and pasted. The housing section of this is almost identical, if not less ambitious than the 2016 housing policies, which were terrible. So read it. Read what's similar. Read what's different. Transport's different. I'll give you that. Transport is different. Climate is different. Great. Find your own balances. And it comes back to maybe what Nasa Harrigan said. If you can put up with the fact that this is going to be a fiscally conservative government, if you can put up with the fact that homelessness probably will get worse, if you can put up with the fact that housing will get worse, there probably will be austerity. I can't say definitely, I might be wrong, but that, as I read it, if you can put up with that and on that balance and still vote for the transport policies or for the energy policies, vote for it. Like, vote for it. That's that. If that's why you're in politics, if that's what you believe in, vote for it. Go ahead, you know. But if that's not, if you can't do that, vote no, because it won't be good for the climate movement. It won't be good. We need people on board. It needs to be a just transition. That's not what this is. I mean, we don't just say the words just transition for the crack. It has to be. There's a reason they're the words that were on my leaflet for the election. You know, this will, if I think what happens in this program for government will happen, it'll be bad for my community and my family and people around me, and they'll be put off the climate movement. And they might think now, oh, we have to have a government with the Greens get in, but they might be annoyed that the Greens don't go in. They might be annoyed that the Greens messing around, but they'll be far more annoyed in 2 or 3 years' time if the policies that I think are in this are going to have a really negative effect on their life. And you have a duty now to read this and think of those people. We have to stand over this entire document, not just the transport. We don't get to say, oh, we had nothing to do with that. We voted through. We support it. So if you can't do that, then vote no. Seriously, vote no. You know, I mean, if you're someone earning 60, 70 to 100,000 plus 150,000, living in an urban setting like a city or a big town or whatever in Ireland, there's nothing in this programme for government that you have to worry about. If you have a house, if you have a roof over your head, you're in a job that you've held on to through COVID, you're earning quite a lot of money, and you live in an urban setting, you have nothing to worry about from this programme for government. There's literally nothing in this that's going to negatively affect you. That's not an aim. It shouldn't be an aim to negatively affect anyone. But if you're someone earning not a huge wage, if you're on the lower earner spectrum and you live in rural Ireland, there's a hell of a lot in this programme for government you should be seriously worried about. And that's what we have to say. We can say, well, it might not actually affect them. The carbon tax and then the refund through welfare and the retrofit might actually make their life better. Might. But the person on 100,000 a year, they get a grant to retrofit their house and they have to put in maybe 10 grand of their own money. They can afford an electric car. They can change their ways. This will improve their standard of living. It will reduce their cost of living. There's nothing in this programme for government like that will really affect them. Unless they eat really sugary food, you know. Like think about that. That's how inequality happens. You know, we hit one section of society hard, we don't hit the other. Now I might be wrong, but we're putting the risk on the lower section of society, on the poorer section of society. We're putting that risk on them for our climate action. And it might not be us that wants to do that. I don't want to do that, and I know the person I'm speaking to in the Green Party doesn't want to do that. They want to do this another way. They want to do this to the person who not do anything, but they don't want that person paying for it. They'd borrow the money, or they would, you know, be honest about the taxation measures necessary or whatever that is, you know. And that's fine, but the reality is, are we willing to put that risk on those people? And don't forget as well that according to voter placement, now not according to policies, but according to self-placement of voters, Fine Gael is the furthest right wing of voters. Fianna Fáil is the second most right wing of voters. Now they're almost identical. They both are about 7 out of 10 on the right-left spectrum, both sets of voters. And then the Greens are about 4.5, but they're actually the third most right wing of voters, or 5 maybe, 4.5 to 5. Their policies are about 4, but their voters are slightly further right. Now, you have to think about this. You're representing the 3 furthest right wing of voters, if that makes sense. Now, the Greens don't want the right wing voters really, but they want every voter. Every party wants every voter. But that's a reality. We do have a middle class voter base. Even the exit polls, we can change that, fine. But according to who voted for us in the recent election, it was a middle class people. It was a middle class people voted Fine Gael, and it was a predominantly middle class people voted Fianna Fáil. So we are and an upper class actually on Fine Gael, and even to the Greens on Fianna Fáil to an extent. So we are excluding the vast majority of the working class voting public and their representation in this, and we are asking them to change their behaviour massively and it's the people they voted against asking them to do it and putting them in a difficult position. Will that be successful? I don't think so. I get the passion we have to go in and try and make that successful. I don't think that'll be successful.
I think that line that you said is really, really powerful, that we're putting that risk on poorer people for climate action. I think that it really answers the question, I guess, for some voters, that if they're on the fence at this stage, that they maybe need to think about if that risk is worth it.
And just to say, I think maybe half the Green Party voters don't know, like not members. I think half the members don't know, don't see that in the finance section. You know, they see there's this protection measure in this for this person. There's this protection in for they don't see that, but I see it as a huge risk. Like I see a risk of austerity. I see poor housing policy. I see a regressive carbon tax. That's a lot of risk to put on those people. Yeah. It's a lot of risk. That's a lot of like juggling. God, I hope I'm wrong, but that's why I have to vote against it, unfortunately.
Well, look, Tate, it was really lovely to have you on the programme, man. I'd love to have you back another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just not next week.
Maybe next week well, maybe next Saturday you'll be delighted and you'll be looking to come on.
Yeah.
But no, on a serious...
The country will be out to get me for stopping a government being formed. There we go.
Well, what did Varadkar say, that it would be the greatest risk to democracy or something if this bill got rejected? So.
I'd rather risk the political structure than risk working class people's lives, but there we are.
Well, Tate Donnelly, thank you for coming on The New View, man. We'll see you again sometime soon.
Thanks, Colin. I appreciate it.
Take care, man. All the best.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.